Harvey Weinstein will be sentenced this week and could spend up to 29 years in prison. Gretchen Carlson is one of the many women who are watching this case very closely. She reached a settlement with Fox News in 2016 after suing her boss for sexual harassment. Her story inspired the Oscar-nominated film Bombshell. We sat down to talk about the movie and what's next for the Me Too movement.
Is this your last day as an innocent man?
Harvey Weinstein's accusers kept quiet for decades. Silence the women. That was part of the strategy.
Harvey, you messed with the wrong women.
It's not just Hollywood actresses applauding the guilty verdict. Former Fox and Friends anchor Gretchen Carlson tweeted, "I hope the handcuffs are tight. #MeToo." In 2016, years before Me Too became a movement, Carlson launched a sexual harassment lawsuit against Roger Ailes, her former boss at Fox. She had been secretly preparing for years, even sneaking her iPhone into meetings with Ailes. In one conversation, he allegedly said, "I think you and I should have had a sexual relationship a long time ago, and then you'd be good and better, and I'd be good and better." Fox apologized, and Carlson reportedly received $20 million. But part of her settlement includes an NDA.
Someone has to speak up. Someone has to get mad.
That means she can't talk about what happened to her, or even talk about how she was portrayed by Nicole Kidman in the movie Bombshell.
Ready to go to war?
Oh, yeah.
About 1/3 of American employees are bound by NDAs. There's no comparable Canadian data, but NDAs are commonly used to settle sexual harassment cases, and that's not okay with Gretchen Carlson.
Non-disclosure agreements were originally designed to safeguard the sharing of corporate secrets, but they're not supposed to protect predatory behavior. My NDA means I'm legally prohibited from discussing what really happened to me.
She's formed a foundation with other former Fox News employees, and she's asked all presidential campaigns to publicly condemn NDAs, which ended up hurting Michael Bloomberg's campaign.
We are not going to beat Donald Trump with a man who has who knows how many non-disclosure agreements and the drip, drip, drip of stories of women saying they have been harassed.
So here we are. Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for doing this.
Of course, I'm looking forward to it.
So interesting for me, back when I was a child reporter, the Anita Hill hearings were happening, and she was accusing someone who wanted to be a Supreme Court judge, who is now, of sexual harassment. And everyone was like, sexual harassment? I mean, harassment, that's when people yell at you, right? It was like, this is 1991. People had no idea what sexual harassment was.
Right, and ironic that you say you were a cub reporter, because I was too. And one of my first assignments at my very first job in television was to cover the Anita Hill hearings.
He said that if I ever told anyone of his behavior, that it would ruin his career.
And I remember thinking to myself, why do they not believe her? And being so outraged at the way in which she was treated during those hearings. Then I was promptly sexually harassed on that job.
I didn't even know the term sexual harassment or how to pronounce it. Like we had to be told what it was. It wasn't a thing.
Right. Well, and of all the research and things that I found out now since my case 3.5 years ago, I've actually met the woman who coined the term sexual harassment, and I believe it was in the early 70s. So it hasn't been an issue that's been in our culture for that long, but for some reason, the reputation of women who came forward with regard to harassment or harassment.
How do you?
Yes, I say harassment, you say harassment. But the reputation was that somehow the woman was a troublemaker, and that she had done something to bring it on. And then how that's evolved in American workplaces is that the first thought is when a woman comes forward is, let's get rid of her. And that's what we're trying to change with Lift Our Voices, our organization. We actually believe that we can make an entire cultural shift in the way in which American workplaces handle this issue. And the way in which they should is to not go to that old school way of getting rid of the woman, making her sign a settlement, and making her sign a non-disclosure. And then she never works again, but the perpetrator gets to stay on the job.
When you first started on this, there was you got a lot of response on social media. Is that what's leading this revolution? You're now tweeting politicians. I mean, is this happening because of social media?
Well, you're a mom, I'm a mom. I don't like social media for my kids, but I will say that it has helped us greatly in this movement. Social media was really the reason why the Me Too movement exploded. My case was a full 15 months before the Harvey Weinstein allegations, and the floodgates opened with Me Too. But what made that so successful was that people could go on social media and either put their name and face on their story or remain anonymous. And that made people feel comfortable to just tell their stories, and they just grew and grew and grew. And now, yeah, we can tweet a presidential candidate and we can say, you need to join our fight. And if they don't respond, people will come after them that aren't necessarily even just us. So social media has helped us greatly in getting awareness out there and also putting pressure on presidential candidates to have to respond.
Has the media changed?
Well, I do believe that they have, because the media is actually covering these stories. If I had said to you as a fellow journalist 3.5 years ago that newspapers, magazines, and television stations were actually going to dispatch several reporters to only cover harassment stories, you would have laughed at me. And why? Because we weren't covering those stories. The media didn't care about those stories.
Well, and now you've got movies and TV shows and everything.
Well, right. But how could I have ever known that when I stepped forward? I didn't know what was going to happen the next day or the next hour or the next month. To see the amazing progress that has been made and to actually have my story recreated in a miniseries and a movie is not something that I ever could have expected.
So now we have the movie, Bombshell, starring Nicole Kidman.
Learn to get along with the boys. You're sexy, but you're too much work. I have a whole list.
What's it like to watch Nicole Kidman tell your story? Is it your story?
Well, I can't comment on that, unfortunately. It's a surreal experience to have these amazing actresses playing my character.
But it's just your character? You
Yeah,
can't
it's just
say
my character.
Whether, because
no,
that's...
because I signed this non-disclosure. So I can't comment on the accuracy of it. I can say that I'm really happy that an actress of her caliber decided to take on this role, because I think that it gives it credence, right? It gives the issue credence. But this is why I created Lift Our Voices, to eradicate NDAs for the thousands of other women all around the world who are also muzzled and silent.
After I saw the movie Bombshell, research of course, I went and watched Fox and Friends. It was kind of weird because there's this woman in a very short dress and high heels, and there's Steve Ducey, the guy that you complained about his behavior.
Today's my last day, so a big thank you to the two men sitting on the couch with me.
They're still there, and it's still, has anything really changed?
I'm not really worried about that entity. I'm focusing all of my work on, all the women who've reached out to me and trying to change the rest of the world.
The things that you can?
Yeah. I mean, trust me, there's enough for me to work on. This is a great challenge, but one that I'm extremely optimistic about.
It seemed, when I asked you about Fox and Friends, it seems there's something going on there. What was?
Yes, because of the fact that I signed a non-disclosure, I have to be very careful what I say to you or to anyone in any interview. And so my brain is actually on overdrive when I'm asked questions about that, because I have to be extremely careful. This is why I'm fighting to end this, so that women are not forced into these situations where they can't tell you their truth. So, it's not because I don't want to answer you. I do. It's because I can't.
And you have to think about it.
I have to think about every angle of it, exactly.
Yeah. So will you ever be able to spill all the beans?
Oh, well, I hope so. I'm working towards that end. Listen, if companies want to do the right thing, they will make these changes without being forced to do it. But we can go and introduce bills here on Capitol Hill, and we can force them to do it. So, I would encourage companies to get on the right side of history.
Thanks so much for talking to me.
Sure.